Okay, so first up, a quick topic, Istio 118 release schedule. I have put together this release timeline here. Folks in the community, please take a look and give me any feedback. And if I don't receive any feedbacks, I will publish the wiki and mark these dates as official. So Paul Marison, who is on this call, is our primary release manager this release. A big kudos to Paul for taking us up. All right.
No problem. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. So with that, John, I believe the next one is yours.
Yeah, a quick note on the, can we make this page? This is where people go to find information about releases, and I don't think they have it set up. I put it on the notes. It's pretty simple, just copy and paste from the previous one and replace the dates and numbers. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm actually in the process of creating that page.
Okay, perfect.
I have not published yet because until we have this kickoff meeting, until we get feedback from folks, I don't want to finalize the dates.
Got it. Okay, yeah. Cool.
So
I literally have it written in other. What's that?
So one concern I potentially have with those dates is it looks like I want to say it looks like you're doing. Let me go back and look at this again to make sure. So branch cut is on the 11th, build ready on the 14th. Okay, that's probably all right. What I was thinking was KubeCon is that next week.
Oh, I see.
So depending on who might need to be around to do anything, it might be a little bit difficult in the following week. I was originally read that as the branch cut was on Friday and the build was going to be like the beginning of the next week, and I was a little bit concerned, but maybe it's okay.
On the bright side, that means that we'll have an alpha build ready for KubeCon if we wanted for Istio Day demos, etc.
We actually already published an alpha build, so that we had something to point to in all the ambient blogs and whatnot. But we'll have a beta build.
Yes.
So my question is, do we need this sooner?
No, I think this is good.
Yeah.
We don't need an official .0 release for KubeCon to do marketing. We can do marketing on the pre-release builds, and we've already started doing that, in fact. So I think this is good to me, and it gives us more time to actually do stuff.
Yeah, you just flipped off that screen too quick, and I was looking at it thinking that we were going to try to do the first build of the week of KubeCon, but looking at it again, it's the week before. So yeah, we should be good.
All right, then let's make these a date. Like I said, I'll publish the wiki right after this meeting, or modify that wiki page, whichever one. All right, so back to John's topic.
All right, thanks. Yeah, the design doc, sorry, I realized I revived the design doc from 2 years ago and it wasn't shared properly, so I'll try and share it properly after the meeting. But for now, I think only a handful of people can see it. Basically, what we're trying to do and what we wanted to do 2 years ago, obviously, given the design doc was written back then, is get telemetry working without Envoy filters. So today, when you install Istio, you get Envoy filters. And there's a few problems with that. One, it's a bit confusing because we tell users don't use Envoy filters. They're super alpha and they're not stable. Users often get confused by it as well. And the performance is atrocious in the excuse me, in the control plane. It's like a 160% performance regression in the control plane serving, just having these Envoy filters. So in my mind, there's a lot of motivation moving off of these onto the new code that basically does this natively and is controlled by the telemetry API, etc. Now, the telemetry API is alpha, but in order to enable just the things that, like the on-off, that's actually not part of the telemetry API. The telemetry API is only needed for more advanced customizations. So my proposal is basically, well, actually, more background. How we do that is via mesh config. So we have a default providers option in mesh config, which has been there for, I don't know, a year or two. And you can list like, oh, and my metrics defaults are Prometheus and Stackdriver. My logging defaults is Envoy, standard out, or whatever. Whatever you want as the defaults. And then you could use telemetry to override those. So with that being said, the proposal here is basically to go take their values.yaml config, which has a few things like you can say telemetry Prometheus enabled, stack driver enabled, and you can do advanced things like Prometheus overrides, and then that's just like a bunch of low-level Envoy configuration. So the idea is to take the usual configs that people have, which is just on or off, and if they have those configs, turn off the Envoy filters and replace it with customizing the mesh config defaults. Now, if they do have the customizations, which again, I think is going to be like very few people, like less than 1% of people, we will instead just emit a warning that we're going to deprecate those eventually and make no changes otherwise. So if you're using advanced features, you still get the old Envoy filters. For most users, you just get the new method, which is faster and simpler and less confusing. So that's the general gist of it. I'll take questions. Yes, Carson.
Yeah, I'm pretty strongly against making any change to existing Istio when we have ambient coming and all the disruptions that will come with it. Having it by default in ambient, wonderful. But I would minimize the change for the existing users because it will break some users, will, force us to focus attention on the change on the classic Istio. It's probably too much already with the migration to ambient and new APIs, the changes and so forth. Let's do it in ambient, have it in gateways, maybe a class of gateways that are specific to ambient where we can make the changes we need. And leave Istio alone. It's slow, but people are using it. If they want fast, they move to ambient. And obviously for gateway, if they use a gateway, new gateway API with gateway class and so forth, they get a faster one. If they want stability, they get. I mean, we should not mess with stability on Istio Classic. That's my primary concern. I have a secondary concern. Sorry for taking so long. We have, there are all kind of discussion about, open telemetry. It's becoming a standard that a lot of people are starting to use. I'm not saying we should not keep maintaining the API we have, but we know very well that the high cardinalities that we are using, it's pretty bad. We know that there are better ways to do via hotel access log or other solutions. Maybe like with CA, where we are not adding feature to Citadel, we are not making changes, but instead rely on CAS on Cert Manager and other providers. We should probably do the same for telemetry. I mean, rely on the Open Telemetry Collector and all the other solutions that exist in this space and kind of withdraw from the space of doing our own telemetry. That's my two-side concern.
Yeah, I would say on the second one, even if we do defer most of the logic to open telemetry, we still need to say, I want telemetry or not. And that's what this would enable. So it would allow us to swap out the Prometheus string to open telemetry fairly easily.
No, I know, but again, perfectly fine doing it in ambient for sure, 100%. But
yeah,
more. I mean, we have too much. I mean, it's already, and that will be an alpha feature. It will become beta, and I mean, it's by the time we are done with having this production ready, probably nobody will use sidecars anymore.
So
I don't know what you mean about time. Like once the sphere is merged, then it's done. Like there's no.
Well, theoretically, every new feature, any new change needs to go through some cycles, need to be tested. We need to figure out what it breaks. We need to, we have a process that we kind of bypass with all those experimental flags or I mean, it's going to be an experimental flag, not an API already. So you know how.
I don't know how we'd have an experimental flag to change the implementation details of something that's intended to move off of an experimental thing. Yeah. Like it's not like a new, I mean, I agree it could break things, but if it's going to break things, we shouldn't merge it. It's hard to have a, experimental flag for refactoring.
When did it work? Yeah, no, I understand.
Yeah.
I understand. And let's start doing it in ambient first. See with ambient breaks.
I did do it in ambient. We did do this. So, I mean, there is that.
Yeah, Costin, to your first point, I feel the need to I think everybody understands this, but I feel the need to say that ambient's not an option for a lot of people yet. Like it's not to beta. Beta is when Istio guarantees, or doesn't guarantee, but it basically says, hey, this is something we're going to use in production. And so while I generally understand the desire to minimize the any changes to Istio Classic, the reality is for a very large percentage of customers, they're not using anything that's not marked as production ready. I think that's my understanding of the current timeline is that Ambient's looking to get to beta by end of the year. Is last I heard. I don't know if that's changed, but I think it probably still makes sense to try to be very selective about what gets changed by Istio Classic. But I'm a little worried about the idea of they can just use Ambient because as of now it's not an option for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a completely, black and white thing. I mean, it's if changes can be done. I mean, adding new features that are off by default, whatever is fine. But if it's something that has a major impact and what I don't know, if it's completely transparent and we just see a performance improvement, no problem. But if the user needs to do anything, yeah.
Yeah, I kind of agree. Like behavioral change, like we have the TLS verification thing. Like we have at least I have made the decision that like we'll just turn that on Ambient because dealing with the actual behavioral change is too much of a headache in sidecars. But in this case, unless I mess up, it's intended to be totally transparent. So the one other thing I forgot to mention the actual motivation for this because I thought of this a long time ago and forgot to put it on the agenda. So when you use the Envoy filters for telemetry, you actually can't use the telemetry API itself because they are completely orthogonal. So I totally forgot the real reason why I wanted this. Not a small performance boost. It's so that you can actually use telemetry.
Okay, in this case, I'm 100%
yeah, sorry, I buried the lead there, but yeah.
That's an important reason.
Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
No, I was just going to say, did we talk about maybe just having a warning saying like, look, we're going to remove Envoy filter telemetry. You should switch to that instead of moving them over automatically. Just like give them advance warning and then eventually remove it from regular and don't support it in Ambient or whatever. Like
the reason I didn't want to do something like that and wanted to do this more transparent mode was because today almost all users have metrics enabled, and most users just do Istio cuddle install. They don't even configure things necessarily, right? I don't want to tell every single Istio user you have to go change your config and set to like telemetry.new or something. I have no issue with people that are customizing telemetry to have to change their customizations, but just the run-of-the-mill user, I don't think should have to change settings.
Because you think the proportion is very different for people that have customized versus not. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and like if you're doing advanced customizations of things, like you have to be able to Istio cuddle install and not get warnings, right, with no settings. Like that's kind of a given, I think.
So what possible breakages could this cause? What kind of problems are we looking at?
What could happen is just the logic is faulty. So they had things enabled and we changed their behavior is one option. I mean, hopefully that doesn't happen, obviously, but bugs can happen. The other is that they had some intimate interaction with the Envoy filter itself rather than the behavior and like looked for that config to do something somehow. Those are kind of the main things. It would seem fairly obscure. If it helps anything, we did this in our internal product like a year ago. So there is at least some prior art to this that's been in production for a while.
But your first argument, I mean, the fact that the beta API doesn't work with our filters, that's probably more than enough.
Yeah.
We have a beta API that is not.
I think it makes sense to me. We've been wanting to get users off of Envoy filters. This has been on the backlog for the telemetry working group for 2 years now. More than 2 years now. I think ever since we deprecated Mixer.
Yeah. Let me put it this way. We have in the telemetry or the Envoy filter, there's a regex match on the version. And we found out that regex match is slow. So we had a hot path for it. And we hard coded a list of versions to hard code. And when we first put it on, it was up 1.4 to 1.6, and the comment said this should be enough. We've bumped that now to 1.20 slowly over the years as we've kept not doing this. So it's been very, very, very long time coming.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to retire the tech debt if we're able to do it safely.
But going back to my second point about OpenTelemetry, and we also have the fundamental problem is that we rely very much on high cardinality metrics. So probably in future we'll need to do something about fixing the fundamental problem, which is what metrics we generate, which are also Istio IO metrics, not standard. So some revamp of telemetry in ambient, hopefully, probably need to be discussed for some future version.
Go ahead, Lane.
Yeah, so I have an alternative is leave this alone, and when we promote the telemetry API to be beta or stable, we can deprecate this Envoy filter based mechanism.
The problem, Lay, is that we effectively can't do anything with telemetry until we do this, because if you use telemetry and you have these Envoy filters, you will get double telemetry.
Okay. Yeah, that's a valid point. Because I see there are, I guess, concerns from Quad and Z-Ring. So if these comments can be addressed before, I think, the environment group approve this PR, that would be nice.
Well, that's why I'm here in the working group, because we didn't get consensus on the PR.
Yeah, I see one comment from Z-Ring is this PR is too complex and unmaintainable. So that is raise some concerns from me, yeah.
Go ahead, Ben.
I was just going to say, so I guess the only concern I have about the complexity of the Helm stuff is like, that's fine in the short term, is like, we need to get people off Envoy filters. But then I guess the next question is, so when do we drop that, right? Eventually, we've gotten everybody off except people that are customizing stuff. We're warning them. Eventually, they should do their own config to move. When can we just say, okay, no, we're not going to convert you. We're just going to assume that you're not using Envoy filters. Is that the switch to ambient, right? Like ambient only supports telemetry API as sort of like a gate, and then once ambient is there, we can drop this stuff. Like when can we drop the complex Helm logic, right? That's the question that's being raised in the PRs. It's complicated. We don't want to support that. If this is a migration, what's the timeline for, okay, the migration is over and we're not going to automatically convert things. We're just going to use the thing. And if you're still in the old stuff, you're out of luck.
Yeah, good question. So I think in ambient, it obviously makes sense to not support the telemetry filters or the Envoy filters at all. But even once we ship ambient, we'll still have the sidecar stuff. So I think we would probably, assuming we don't want to maintain this complex logic, which I think is fair, we would probably want to remove the Envoy filters even for sidecars in total at some point. So let's say we merge this in 1.18. We have warnings for the advanced users that are overwriting. That would give us precedence to remove it in 1.19. We could also wait longer. I don't have a terribly strong preference there. Go ahead, Costin. I know you want to say something.
Yeah, I want to say something, and you know what I want to say. We discussed many times that the idea of having install mode or a separate Helm chart maybe that is beta only and only has it's more targeted toward ambient without all the filters, without all the complexity, which is just the stuff that is supported in ambient and can be used for someone who just wants ambient and doesn't want to deal with the 200 options that no longer work. I think it will be super worth investing, and I think we can probably volunteer to do some of the work to have this kind of Istio D 2.0 or how you want to call it, but to basically have a chart that's beta plus ambient plus nothing else. I mean, no of the alpha feature, no experimental, just something to use in production and not be bothered with Envoy filters or other things.
So yeah, I think I brought something like that up, like a Istio safe mode, in a working group meeting in the past. I know people who would be very interested in that. because there is a lot that you can shoot yourself in the foot with. There's a lot happening right now with ambient, and so I'm not sure what the best timing would be to pursue something like that, but I'm definitely interested in working to get something like that into the project.
Yeah. Sorry, Kit, I didn't want to take credit for your idea. We had separate discussions as well, and
no. I just wanted to say, like, we brought this up a couple of weeks ago, and like I'm still very interested in seeing something like this happen. And it wasn't my idea. I'm sure it's been talked about before.
I'm very happy that we have the same idea because it's and I don't think it's too early to start because it's not very difficult to start a parallel Istio chart. John did it. I mean, we did it 3 times so far in the project. I mean, so we can have an Istio chart that is just removing all the craft and just leaves the stable options. Even again, mesh config even is not cast in stone or I mean, we for 3 years we said we are going to remove mesh config.
I think the challenge has always been the alpha features that we have a default reliance on, similar to this Envoy filter use case here that we're looking at. But as soon as we're able to have a working Istio that does not engage any of those alpha features, I think we should absolutely have an option for that in Helm.
Which is not black and white. I mean, if we remove 90% of this, and if we remove the Envoy filter CRT with this PR, and we just have, we can keep few things. I mean, it's not that bad, but at least we get started and we know where we go.
Okay, can I ask a clarification question? Does this PR remove Envoy customer resource completely? I thought it was just getting telemetry move from using Envoy filter. I mean, I don't agree with removing Envoy filter customer resource.
No, it's not the custom resource definition. It's just the instances of it. So when you install today, you get those like, what's it called? Like stats 1.14, 1.16, 1.18, whatever.
Okay, yeah,
those will be
got
gone.
it.
You'll be enabled through mesh config instead.
I thought that was the intention, but the conversation between Keith and Carsten, I got confused.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a separate issue of enabling only beta features, which is inspired by this, but not the same.
Yeah, and you didn't get confused. I think both of us were saying that in safe mode, you will not have Envoy filters. By definition, I mean, it cannot be safe using Envoy filters.
Because it's the alpha feature and the safe mode is only for beta. Okay.
Even if it was beta or GA, the whole definition of patching with, I mean, it's there are too many risks, and you use alpha Envoy filters, and it's a can, or you cannot really be safe with Envoy filters.
Yeah. Okay, makes sense. So it sounds like there's no concern on this move to remove the telemetry usage of Envoy filter.
No, I think enthusiastic support. Sorry for my first, I didn't get the full context, John. Sorry.
Cool. I will relay this onto the PR. I think technically it needs the environments group approval, which is Carsten. Yep. But there's people pushing back on it, so we should probably make sure that they're not objecting to it before we merge it.
Did I read the room correctly, and there is no strong objection to the safe mode that Kit proposed?
I'm a little bit concerned about being a separate chart. I'm not sure that I'm looking at most of the values. Almost all of them I think apply to ambient and or beta. But the concept of safe mode, yes. The implementation as a separate chart, I'm not yet convinced. I could be maybe, but
I don't think it's a separate chart, necessarily a separate chart either. Necessarily, I think you could probably get away with doing it in the same chart. I have questions around enforcement, like how far is this going to go? Are you going to allow people to set values, or like how would that work? Yeah, you might need a separate chart if you didn't want to allow Helm values, because you add another like level of conditionals to all the Helm chart logic if you're in safe mode. So
that's why I was proposing a new chart, because most values will be gone, mesh config will be gone. basically it will be much easier to inspect and see what's enabled and what is not enabled and what is possible and what is not possible. So basically leaving Istio with, I mean, the problem we have, it's not only alpha API, it's also 1,000 environment variables we have in pilot, which are leaked through the Helm chart. As long as you install and you cannot set these versions, you are safe.
Yeah, but people can always set them on the deployment afterwards, right? It seems like if you truly want a safe mode, it would actually be deeper than the Helm chart.
I agree, and that's something I'm also proposing, but take it slowly, basically. I mean, yes, eventually there will be an option in Istio or a build of Istio, a conditional build of Istio that will not even have those options. But that's, again, let's start with, because then you have the chart and you set the options and they don't exist anymore. So that's.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just concerned about more charts. I think people get confused with the two gateway charts already. So having two Istio charts may be confusing as well. That's all. I definitely agree with the idea, though. I think clearly they need, Kubernetes does it as well. So there's precedence.
Yeah, it sounds like there's, like you said, there's folks interested. I see Ben in the chat, myself and Costin. So I'll gather some feedback from some users that I'm talking to, and start thinking about. I'll talk with y'all offline and figure out what this might look like.
All right. Is that everything on this topic? I take that as a yes. So next, I believe is Puru. Did I say that right?
Yeah, shall I go ahead?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think this query I have is somewhat related to a PR I raised, and on one of the doc, Costin shared some inputs, John shared some inputs on a PR. So I think through the our PR and other discussions, I just wanted to bring out one underlying motivation and concern we had, and want to take a community's view. Yeah, since those earlier discussions were fragmented, I thought this forum would be, I'll be able to get the collective view. So the concern is when, so in this call graph, what we see, service A is calling B, and B's upstream is service C. And when service B in 1DC is unavailable, we are relying on failover capabilities, that is failover priority. So service A will fail over to service B in service A in DC1 will fail over to DC2. That is the blue line here, right? So now for the subsequent upstream call, that is service C, with the existing default failover configurations, service C in DC2 will have to scale out for the additional traffic coming via the failover path, which is blue path, right? So however, service C in DC1 is completely healthy, right? So our intention is, this is what we are referring to as additional or cascading scale outs. And we, for a call graph which is very deep, service D and E and F, right? All those will be additional scale outs. We are looking at that as a concern, as a avoidable scale outs. So what's the community's opinion or view on such scale outs?
To be clear, DC1 and DC2 are in different regions in your example?
Sorry, could you repeat?
DC1, DC2 are in the same region or they are in different regions?
Yeah, they are different regions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that means
please read.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, please read DC as different region. So yeah, thanks for, sorry for that misnomer. Yeah.
Wait, sorry, I'm a bit confused. Do we want the red line to happen, or do we want service B to call service C in DC2?
We want red line to happen. Why we are preferring that is service C in region 2 will have to scale out, and service in DC1 region 1 will not be utilized because service B has failed in region 1, so no local calls will happen.
Yeah, I think the expectation would be that like you should want the DC2 service C because it's going to be far faster, right? If you don't want that, then you should set rules that will make it reject the service C ones because it hit outlier detection or circuit breakers of too many requests, and then it will start spilling over to DC1. It seems a bit odd that you want the slower path.
Yeah, I think there is a maybe it will share some view how we are our topology is. So when we have two regions, as the customer I'm working with, their e-commerce site, and they are located in two regions. Both are private data centers. So to keep them both operational, and they are operating from the same the customers of that company of that site is in one geographical location, right? So to keep both the regions operational, they are sharding users into two different regions, and so they're achieving two things here by keeping two regions for business continuity purpose, and so since they are sharding, right, for some region, for some users who are there's some user shards are pinned to a specific region, right? So if you have US East and US West, so a subset of 50% of the users are pinned to US East and 50% of the users are pinned to US West. So all this the data of the users in pertaining to the service C is local to serve in region 1, and that has to get replicated cross region, right? So from that sense, the data is fresh in region 1 for the users pinned in region 1. I hope you guys could follow that.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, I think this is possible even today with Istio. Like this multiple hop state is something that is basically the same as tracing, right? In tracing, you have to propagate headers. You would have to do the same. So like on the first hop from service A, you'd have to set a header that says like, I don't know, next DC equals 1 or something. Your services, every single one of your services would need to propagate that header. Envoy cannot possibly do that. It has to be your own applications. But then Envoy could be configured so that if it sees that header, it will always prefer that DC, and you can set up virtual services and destinational subsets to do that. But I think we have the building blocks to do this, but it's not something that Envoy can do automatically. You have to do it by propagating headers, I think.
Yes, go ahead, Costin.
Sorry, I mean, that's what I was trying to put in the comments on the document as well. It's not something that Istio can do by pushing configuration to all services. It's something that requires something as a data path, because it's closer actually to persistent sessions that we just added, where you actually want the request to go to a very specific instance in specific, wherever it is. So route to a specific IP and port. And we do it through cookie or to header. In your case, you want to control the region dynamically. So if a request comes to service B from DC2, I mean, if it enters through the right side, it will go will keep going on the right side, and if it goes through the left side, it will stay on the left side. So it's you keep it regional even if you fall back. But that's in the data part. I mean, it depends on where the request originated in reality. So it's a kind of an extension to what we did for persistent sessions, in my opinion. And completely agree with John, to a header and some code filter or whatever that will allow you to do this kind of dynamic routing.
Yes, Costin. So like John mentioned, right, using the building blocks, we came up with a solution using the same building blocks, using a header that is getting propagated through every hop. and at every service level we are segregating the requests into subsets. We are defining subsets for each region and segregating them into subsets, and now at each subset level, which is in the scope of a specific region, we are selecting endpoints that are preferred for that region. So that is how we are solving it. So it's since we are using subsets and everything, it's not, I mean, in a way it's not very dynamic. We are able to achieve the behavior with the static configurations itself. So did I understand correctly when you say what is dynamic there?
Yeah. No, you are doing right, but if your concern is to have too many configurations to write and it's too verbose, this can be automated a bit with some by having a filter that and kind of putting some of the logic in Envoy. So you don't have to duplicate this code like we do the sessions basically.
Yeah, that is not a concern for us because our regions will be very limited, maximum to 4, right? So we are fine with that configurations. So I think we are in the same direction what you have been suggesting. So there is one capability that is needed now in a subset, like say region 1, irrespective of so the while selecting the endpoints for the request in region 1, if the request has originated from region 2, it has to select region 2. So that endpoint selection is agnostic of client proxy values. So there was that enhancement that was needed. So the two approaches, there was one PR we have raised, and that I think there's one of the reviewer shared that is not very elegant. He was suggesting about introducing a new API, maybe failure priority selectors, right? That's where there is another custom RFC which is proposed. So how do we get that support to select endpoints agnostic of client proxy, right? So that is not possible today.
Well, you can select them, but do you also need failover? Like if DC1 is down, then you want to go to DC2?
Yeah, that's good to have. Yeah, that
because you can, otherwise you can already do it with the subset. You can just select labels of endpoints and you can just say match region equals DC1.
Yeah, that would serve our necessary needs, but an order for those failures also would be good to have. So Costin, so if the other documentation, right, where we were discussing, so a failure priority selectors, right, which is agnostic of client proxy values and allows and without the semantic of that scope, which is included in current failure priority, right? For the first label n-1 labels has to match, and all that semantics, right? All that complex logic. So that is making that is really tricky. But what we want is a simpler failure priority labels that will help us express this kind of requirement, right? Endpoints matching the first selector would get priority 0 and second selector would get priority 1. That would operate agnostic of client proxy values, and also there's no scoping semantics. So that was the proposal there. We saw this requirement, and that proposal was in similar context. So that's why I brought up this point there.
Yeah, I mean, I usually push back on APIs proposals that have extremely narrow use cases. I think this is you're probably one of the first to have this use case, and they have a high cost. It's confusing users. I would if you must start with mesh config, which is alpha experimental, and wait until more users have this use case wait until we have more practice with this, and then we should propose a CRD. That was my because we did it many times. We jumped to the CRDs early, and then we had difficulties changes because after you push it out, it's very difficult to make any change. Don't disagree with your feature request. I don't know with the use case, just how to approach it in API perspective.
Sure. Sorry, I was not following the chat. Please guide me if I'm.
Yeah, I was saying, like, I agree with Costin, and like the use case is actually primarily solved. You can have what the diagram shows. The thing that's hard to do is say, I want to prefer DC1, but allow DC2 in case DC1's down. Although if you only have 2 or 3 regions, I think you could probably do it using the existing failover priority API and just defining like labels that are inverse or something. Like, I don't know exactly how to do it. It would not be pretty, as Costin says, but instead of saying, I'm trying to think how you do it. Like somehow, like on DC2 things, make some label that says DC1, and then like have that be the primary match, and then the secondary match be the region. I don't know. I'm pretty sure you could do it. I wouldn't want to do it beyond 2 regions, but if you only have 2 regions, it's probably not so hard to do.
Yeah, sure. The not pretty one also would, if that goes through and if it is available in the we will be happy to use that.
No, that's something that you guys do. You would label your nodes, and then you can just use the existing APIs.
Yes. What I was referring to is that PR, right, where we have installed it, like a label is equal to some value, and which is overriding the client proxies metadata.
Right. I'm just saying, like, you could do, if you only have 2 regions, I think you could already do this today with the failover priorities by using some kind of hacks. So I kind of agree with Costin that I'm not convinced that an API is what we need at this time.
But if you mess with Envoy and you know, taking as an example session filters, having more flexibility into Envoy path, so control plane doesn't have to do all this heavy lifting and compute all those completely crazy you know, endpoints, clusters, and so forth for rare use cases. I don't think it would be very bad if Envoy had the capability to do some of this processing in band, basically. So to WASM, to some filter, to some because not everything needs to be done by control plane by pushing configs everywhere and kind of pre-assembling it, when you can do a bit of logic on Envoy.
Okay, in the WASM approach that you were suggesting,
that's the least likely to happen. It will require some additional hook into WASM to allow, because right now the WASM is called after the request is routed, after the cluster is known. But if someone convinces the WASM people to add an extra hook to allow customization of the endpoint selection, it will simplify a lot of other things, and it will help with the persistent sessions. It will help with a lot of other things where you want to put some logic on how you select the endpoint cluster in region programmatically.
Yes. I think yeah, that may be slightly far-fetched from the current state. Yes, correct.
But an Envoy filter is not a problem. You can this is probably possible with the C++ API. I'm just saying that ideally it should also be an extension point in WASM, because WASM is what we want people to use for extensions, and it's going to help in so many other use cases and simplify so many other things that it's probably worth pursuing, but that's kind of a slow project.
Right. Okay. But sure. Just asking this same question probably. In general, community is not viewing this routing back to the original DC, right? Avoiding these additional scaleouts as a unwanted consequence. Is that the view? Because from private data centers point of view, right, the infra is limited, and we would want to not waste it like in this diagram, right? If service B is down in region 1, and because of that failover, all further upstream services have to the whole call graph will stick to DC2 region 2 alone, and we are wasting region 1 just for one service failing over. So that's a huge cost and huge constraint, because we are operating in private data centers and the infra is limited.
I would say most people actually wanted to stay in region in DC2 because of the high cost of latency. That's I never seen someone who wants to cross regions unnecessarily unless they have stateful sessions or a persistent state. And you'll pay network cross region network cost, which will probably be more expensive than the CPU cost on DC2. If I don't know. Do some back on the
We are not looking at just service C as one upstream. There is a deeper call graph. So there are 10 more hops, and all of them will have to scale out in region 2.
You know, and I understand. Keep in mind, typically, it's not just service B that is failing. So service B is failing probably because there are some network problems or some, So usually when a service is down is because of some, unless it's load based, in which case DC1 will be overloaded anyway. At least in Google, usually, you drain the whole data center if you start having a lot of services, and I never seen this kind of crossing regions in Google infrastructure. We're moving back.
Oh, okay. So the kind of failures we see, it could be application specific issues, a wrong deployment going in, and so that is affecting the requests. So for such failures, we were trying to. Those are more common than infra failures and all that in our scenario. Okay. Sure, I think I have got some direction. So yeah, that is all. Thank you.
All right. Does anyone else have any agenda to discuss? And if not, let's call this a meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.